Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena. After a few months spent in the US helping out family and also of course going to the boat show, I am finally back aboard Athena, ready to dive into some DIY projects. Athena is currently in Trinidad in a yard called Peaks. I think we'll stay here for about 6 to 8 weeks getting some projects done. But we're also going to stay here because Ava is in Budapest working with her sister. When Ava comes back, then we'll splash and start heading north. By the end of this video, not only do I hope to have given you guys a little bit of a glimpse into what I'll be working on here in Trinidad, I also want to have finished installing this thru hull, and there's a very good reason for this new thru hull. I also want to configure and install these wireless temperature sensors from Ruuvi so we can monitor the temperature in our fridge, our freezer, our engine compartment, stuff like that. My name is Mess, this is my wife Ava. I've spent the last 5 years on a somewhat extensive refit of our 1987 Warrior 38 named Athena. That was a DIY fun-packed adventure complete with a very extensive osmosis treatment, building a new rudder using vacuum infusion, rebuilding the entire deck, gutting and subsequently rebuilding most of the interior, painting the top sides, and a ton of other projects. The summer of 2021 we started cruising full time. Now we're finally ready to begin our adventure. As is usually the case when returning to the boat from the US, I have brought a small mountain of stuff. This is all stuff that's impossible to find locally or stuff that's a lot cheaper in the US. It is a bit of an eclectic mix. Most of it is stuff for upcoming projects, but that's also stuff for servicing some of our existing equipment, like for instance these filter cartridges for our dive compressor. I could not find these anywhere in Trinidad. There are some new mooring compensators here, kindly sponsored by Unimir. We have a DC conversion kit for our Starlink, including a brand new PepLink or PepWave router, a new holding tank sensor because one poop explosion is too many poop explosions, a spiffy water purifying system, security cameras for the inside and the outside of the boat, a new Lumar hatch for the head so we can get better ventilation in there, a new oil pan and gasket for the Volvo D240, and last but not least, and this was just to name a few, a game of Catan purely for our enjoyment. Also of note, I have brought back a bunch of ABYC reading material because I'm gonna start studying for some ABYC certifications. I think that is gonna be a lot of fun. Also, as tradition dictates, I have made little paper post-it notes here so that I and you guys can keep track of the projects I'm working on. I don't want to make you guys sit through me rambling through each of these tasks. There's some of them that are not really worth mentioning, but for instance, one of them is revarnishing the kitchen island. As some of you may have noticed over the last couple of years, this has taken quite the beating. We have a small leak or misting from the oil pan on our Volvo D240. Our anchor roller is a little bit kaput. It should be a relatively easy fix. There's a machine shop right across the road that should be able to help us with that. And this one is kind of an annoying one, a galley countertop. Before we left Trinidad, I pulled the countertop off of the galley here because we had a little bit of water seep in between the undermounted sink and the countertop. That caused the varnish to bubble up here on the end of the countertop. That's not so bad, but it also caused the countertop to warp quite substantially. It's out by about 5 or 6 millimeters here in the middle. That's quite a bit. Fortunately, there was no damage to the rest of the galley, so we just need a new countertop. But a new countertop might also be a good opportunity to find a new galley sink. And when we're messing around in the galley, that'll be a good opportunity to install the new water purifier. We tried water from one of these on our friends Bruno and Gustavo's boat, and it was very, very tasty. One of Ava's longtime requests is a finished headliner. I don't know if we'll be able to find a suitable material here in Trinidad, but we can certainly take a look. One of the ones that I am a little bit excited about is a new dinghy hoist winch situation. I found this stainless steel trailer winch in the US, and I'm hoping we'll be able to use that for our dinghy arch. I think it's fair to say I've got my work cut out for me. This is more than I think I can do in 6 to 8 weeks, but we might as well get everything up on the board. This week, and I use that term loosely because I landed here on a Wednesday, I'm going to do 2 smaller projects because I'm going to spend a lot of time off camera prepping for some of the upcoming projects. Like for instance, talking to the machine shop about the anchor roller, also talking to the local Fisher Panda service partner about our wonderful Fisher Panda situation. So yeah, let's get started. Let's grab the first task from the board here, and that is new through hull for air conditioning. Why do we need a new through hull for our air conditioning? Well, as you might recall, I installed the air conditioning back in Mandela when we were waiting for a new drive unit for the autopilot. And we couldn't haul out there, so I just teed off the raw water supply for the air conditioning unit from an existing through hull. That's not the greatest solution, and we've also had another little issue. The pump for the coolant water for the air conditioning is a centrifugal pump, and that's a great choice of pump for a couple of reasons. It moves a lot of water relative to the size of the pump, and also there's no maintenance. There's no impellers, there's no valves, there's nothing you need to do. But there's one big downside, and that's the fact that a centrifugal pump is not self-priming. It can't lift water when it's not already primed. And that's why the centrifugal pump needs to be mounted below the waterline, which I have done. But I think somewhere on the hose that goes to the pump there might be a slight high spot, or it's just a resistance in that long bit of hose. We've gotten a couple of overheating alarms from the air conditioning when using it, and I am 100% sure it's because of my stupid long, somewhat wiggly hose run. And the easiest way to fix it is simply just by putting in a new through hull. I've used a combination of composite through hulls from True Design and these bronze through hulls from Groco here aboard Athena. Generally speaking, I use the bronze one whenever I think there might be a chance of something hitting the through hull. This particular through hull is going to go in the bottom of this locker, which we use quite a bit, as you might be able to tell. The air conditioning unit is up here. That down there is the pump, so there should be room for the through hull down here. The first step was to disconnect the connection to the shared through hull and remove the old sea strainer that I was hoping to reuse. For all the Groco through hulls I have on the boat, I've used their backing pads. They're made out of a lightweight foam-like material, and they come with threaded little inserts that are put in place with a tiny bit of gentle persuasion. I don't like the idea of using PVC plastic parts below the waterline, but I had another option for a sea strainer that I briefly considered. The big issue here is figuring out where to place the sea strainer and the pump so that we avoid any future air conditioning issues, while at the same time losing as little storage as possible. Back when I installed the air conditioning in Cape Verde, I filmed the instructions for the pump and the sea strainer placement. The sea strainer should be below the waterline and also below the pump, which also, as mentioned, needs to be below the waterline. Also, the orientation of the pump is important. After much head scratching, I figured out my best option was to move the pump a little bit further outboard, about 10 centimeters. With the pump and the sea strainer installed, the location of the through hull was pretty straightforward. I marked the spot and drilled the hole with a hole saw. As is usually the case with through hulls, I had to trim the skin fitting so it doesn't just bottom out. Fortunately, bronze is the metal equivalent of room temperature butter and cuts very easily. As a last bit of prep, I also taped the threaded inserts to not get thickened epoxy in the threads. I want to be able to remove the ball valve if I ever need to. It turned out I got kinda lucky with the placement of my hole, as it's only a few centimeters from one of the jack stands. With the skin fitting temporarily taped in place, I could do a dry fit to make sure everything lines up and also to mark the position of the backing pad. After a tiny bit of surface prep, I mixed up a little bit of epoxy from the local chandlery and thickened that with some silica. I applied a generous blob to the back of the backing pad and spun the assembly on the skin fitting and then cleaned up all the squeeze out. After a few hours the epoxy had gelled and I was able to remove the ball valve and the skin fitting without disturbing the backing pad. It is the next morning. What I'm doing here might seem like kind of an odd two-step rocket, and indeed if I had somebody here to help me, I could have finished the installation of all of this stuff yesterday with sealing on the outside and everything, but by doing it this way, I'm absolutely sure that I can disassemble all of this again at some point in the future in case I need to replace the skin fitting or the ball valve. Before permanently installing the ball valve, I'm just going to apply a tiny dab of 4200 on the flange. With all three of the fasteners that secure the ball valve to the flange tightened, I gave the area of the hull where the skin fitting is going to seal against a light sanding to remove the copper coat. With a generous application of sealant, I got the thread started before switching to my very unofficial skin fitting tightening tool. After that, there was just a tiny bit of cleanup. I used a 90-degree hose fitting to make the installation a little bit more compact. All hoses got two high-quality hose clamps where they clamp onto fittings, and I also secured the C-stringer with a zip tie and the hose with a hose clamp to take the load off of the pump. I'm pretty happy with how the installation turned out, and very importantly, as you can see, there is still room for our gigantic heavy Sailrite sewing machine in there. That's kind of its spot, and I don't really know where to put it if we're not putting it in here. The only thing left to do is bonding on all of this, but I'll hold off on doing that until we get to the US. This should hopefully solve our little air conditioning issue. Of course, I can't test the new plumbing until we actually go back in the water, but I'm pretty confident it'll work out. So let's move this task to done. And then I have this one, my last little mini project for this week. This should be fairly quick, but it's something I've been looking forward to for a long time. These are Ruuvi sensors. What's really cool about these things is that they'll allow us to log and monitor temperature via our Cerbo box. So that means we get logging and monitoring directly in the cloud. There are currently 3 different Ruuvi tags. Depending on which model you go with, you get slightly different sensors. For me, I am primarily interested in temperature, and they all do that. The white one here is called Ruuvi tag. This will give you temperature, air humidity, air pressure, and motion. If we go up into the black category here, these are both Ruuvi tag Pros. This one will give you temperature, humidity, and motion. Now you might be able to see the hole that's here, which is absent from this guy over here. That's because this will give you humidity, this one won't. But on the flip side, this one is waterproof. Like I mentioned, I am mainly interested in tracking temperature. Besides just knowing what's going on inside of the boat, I am really excited to be able to track temperature inside of our fridge and our freezer, because that'll allow us to tune the temperature so we're not keeping them too cold, thereby wasting energy. But also being able to monitor the temperature in our engine compartment and our technical compartment is going to be really cool, just to make sure everything is nice and, well, relatively cool in there. Ruuvi also offers a phone app that can talk directly to the sensors. I believe they also have their own gateway that can talk to the sensors, but I am mainly interested in these because of the integration to the Victron stuff. So we can get these to talk with our Cerbo box, and that means all of the temperature logging is going to go directly into the VRM. That gives us a single place to keep an eye on to monitor state of charge, consumption, solar yield, and now also temperature. I pulled the little plastic tab out of the Ruuvi, so now we should be able to go into our menu here, settings, and let's just check that Bluetooth is actually enabled. God dang it. Well, apparently we have a slightly older hardware version of the Cerbo box, and in that version there was apparently some kind of issue with the Bluetooth radio, which caused Victron to push a firmware that either only at higher temperatures or also all the time, I haven't really figured that out yet, but disable the Bluetooth radio that's built into the Cerbo, which is why I couldn't find the Bluetooth in the menu. I remember seeing it back in Denmark, but that was in colder temperatures and also with a much older firmware installed. Yeah, so for me to get the Ruuvi tags to work, I have to get an external USB Bluetooth dongle. Through a bit of random good luck, it turns out the local Victron distributor here in Trinidad stocks one of the approved dongles. So let's see if this works. With the blessed USB dongle installed, we now finally have a Bluetooth menu item here in settings. And if we scroll down to I/O, we can now see there's a listing for Bluetooth sensors. In there, we can enable Bluetooth sensors, and then in a little bit, we should see the first of the Ruuvi tags pop up. There we go. Let's enable that. This should be our Ruuvi sensor, and then if we go into device, we should be able to give that a name. Let's call this one Saloon. And now you can see out here in the device list, we have Saloon listed as 27 degrees Celsius and 44% humidity. Let me just add a Ruuvi tag to the fridge and another Ruuvi tag to the freezer, and then we can take a look at the VRM. I don't want to drill any holes in the installation, so I'm just going to cheat a little bit and use some double-sided sticky doodad to get the sensor in place. And yeah, please excuse the appearance of our fridge here. It's functional, but it is still a bit of a work in progress. The Ruuvi tags seem to be working out great, with one tiny exception, and that's the freezer. I can still read the temperature here with my phone, but the Bluetooth sensor I plugged into the Cerbo box is a little bit further aft, buried beneath a bunch of stuff. It can read the two other sensors, but it just can't quite read the freezer. As you can see here, the freezer is showing up as not connected. That's not the end of the world. I'm sure I can use one of those USB extension leads and just bring the USB dongle up into this area here, and I think that'll make it work. But yeah, let's take a look at the VRM. So this is the VRM, and actually it's kind of cool. I know I said the freezer didn't connect, but it looks like we've gotten another reading from the freezer because the temperature is down to 2.8 degrees Celsius. So yeah, it works every once in a while. But if we go into the advanced tab here in the VRM, and then we scroll down to the bottom, you can see that we now have a saloon temperature here, fridge temperature, and a freezer temperature. The Ruuvi tag in the fridge and the freezer are the waterproof kind, so for those we only have the temperature in here. But for the saloon one, as you can see, we have temperature, humidity, and also barometric pressure. As you might have noticed, the Ruuvi tags in the fridge and the freezer are still coming down to temperature. While we're waiting for that, why don't I go ahead and install the sensor in the technical compartment and in the engine compartment. I have a nice little area for the engine one over here. The technical compartment is a giant mess. That usually happens when we're up on the hard, so please excuse that, but as you can see, I've put the Ruuvi tag up here. I spent a bit of time setting up some alarms here in the VRM so that I'll get notified in case the fridge or the freezer goes below or above a set limit. And as you can see in the VRM, the temperatures seem to have stabilized. The fridge over here is sitting just below 5 degrees Celsius, which I think is perfect for a fridge. And the freezer over here is sitting at minus about 13 degrees Celsius. If you go into the menu in the VRM, under settings, you can see that there is an item called alarm rules. If you select that, then you can set up certain rules for alarms where you want to get notified. In here, you can see the couple of alarms I've set up, the one for the fridge and the one for the freezer. If they go beyond the bounds I've set, then I will get an email notifying me. It appears that the temperature logging is working flawlessly, so we can go ahead and move the Ruuvi sensor tag into the done column. I am super happy that Lloyd, the local Victron distributor, had one of those USB dongles laying around that I could buy. So yeah, if you're going to be adding some Ruuvi tags to your boat and you have a Cerbo box and that's how you want to log the data, I highly recommend you also pick up one of those USB dongles just to be sure it'll work. I'll include a link for the one I used down in the description. And yeah, that's going to be it for this week's video. Next week, I think I'm going to be installing a hatch in the head to get us a little bit better airflow, and maybe also a tank level sensor on the holding tank in the head, because we haven't had that up until now. And, well, maybe a few other things. But yeah, that's going to be it for this week's video. I hope to see all of you guys back here aboard Athena next week for yet more glorious DIY fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you!